strategy for other folks, which makes this conversation extremely exciting for me. I totally geek out on this stuff, and I'm super excited for the conversation that we're about to have today. So with us, we've got Jay Holzer from Tastemade. We've got Alyssa Starkman from Cheddar, and we've got Chase Landau from Pocket Watch. So we'll just jump right into it. Jay oversees linear programming and OTT for Tastemade. The network reaches over 200 million monthly users across YouTube, Facebook, Snapchat, and connected TVs. They create original content in 7 native languages and recently launched a 24/7 streaming network.
Staring at the stars, it doesn't matter the cost, 'cause everybody wants to be famous on coffee shops. So, see you over a bar, it doesn't matter the cost. Seems like everybody wants to think it could be me. The world's too small for me.
Jay, tell us a little bit about the mission of Tastemade, and then about the audiences that you're trying to reach.
Yeah, so Tastemade's about a 6-year-old company. We started the company with the goal of kind of connecting people through food and video. To date, right now we reach about, as James said, we reach about 200 million monthly users across pretty much every platform you can be on. We're primarily aiming at hitting that kind of 18 to 34 demographic with a little bit of a female slant, but one of the amazing things about being on all these platforms is you really get to tailor your content to the specific demographics that that platform hits.
And so one of the things that I think is interesting about the work you're doing is you're not just focused on North American audiences, you actually program internationally. And I'm really curious to know if, as you reach millennials, are there sort of universal truths about what the kind of content that you're targeting millennials with, and does that, what jumps between cultures and not? So can you talk a little bit about how you approach those demographics in various countries?
Yeah, I think, I mean, look, millennials around the world all have mobile phones, and so we see a giant percentage of our consumption happen on mobile devices. Where the countries differ is you'll have a country like Brazil where the mobile penetration rates, at least 4 or 5 years ago, were way higher than a lot of the other countries we were programming to. So we started to see that country specifically have like very high mobile engagement, and we started to create content tailored more towards a mobile audience than like a desktop or an OTT audience. One of the fascinating things about programming to those countries is you kind of have to figure out exactly what stuff resonates with those, and it can't just be, let's take the thing we produced in English, let's throw some subtitles on it, let's do a translation and hope that that works. So we actually propped up studios in those markets to create content for those markets. So it's not us sitting here in America saying, what do we think the Brazilian audience wants? It's people actually in Sao Paulo creating that content for their own audience.
A lot of times when people talk about programming for Latin American audiences, that all gets lumped together as a singular demographic, but that's not what you found.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's giant discrepancies between all of LATAM, right? Like Brazil, obviously you've got a language issue because Portuguese versus Spanish like the rest of Latin America, but also the culture's just different, right? And so something we produce out of our Sao Paulo studio doesn't necessarily work for the rest of Latin America. So we have a studio in Buenos Aires that produces kind of neutral Spanish that kind of covers the rest of Latin America.
And what are some of the differences, say, that you might do with a video that's produced in Brazil versus something that's produced in North America?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot, look, our stuff's all food-based, so packaging, like at a very base level, right? Like you have to get stuff like that right. So the can of condensed milk that's sold in Brazil looks different from the can of condensed milk that we can all go buy. So it's little stuff like that that if you're not producing it in an authentic way towards that specific region, like the viewer will know, and it will feel like they're being sold a thing that doesn't really feel authentic to their culture.
And how do you decide what platforms to go on? Because Tastemade's on a huge number, you have a number of options to get out there. How do you choose once you know the demo that you're after, how do you choose which platform to go actually invest some time and energy into?
Yeah, I mean, we've been on all of them, right? I think it's a lot of trial and error. So for us, it's, if there's a platform out there that reaches consumers, we want to give it a fair shot, and we want to put our content out there and see if we can find some way to resonate with that audience. What'll happen is you'll see some platforms are incredibly successful for us, YouTube, Facebook. Some platforms like Pinterest you would think would work really well for food, but since we're primarily a video company, something like Pinterest doesn't resonate as well for our content. And then in the different international markets, it's really a matter of a platform like Snapchat's massively popular here in the US, but in Brazil they don't have Snapchat Discover, which is one of the main places that we reach consumers on Snapchat. So you've got slightly different ways that those platforms operate and engage with consumers in the different markets.
And what is one secret about programming to the specific demos that you would be willing to share amongst these four walls?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, and I think for a lot of creators, you've got to change your content to fit these different platforms, not just from a kind of a technical standpoint, whether it's vertical video or square video or normal 16:9 video, but you also have to make some choices to kind of program to, for us, Snapchat's a much younger demographic than Facebook, for example, right? So we make content that feels younger, but I think the thing that you have to be always mindful of is how that stuff all connects to your larger brand, right? We could go on Snapchat and we could make stuff that feels like it's made for a 13-year-old. We can go make stuff on Facebook that feels like it's made for a 35-year-old, but those two things all have to kind of coalesce around a common brand. So for us, it's really important to think about, and I think for everybody, like, what does your brand stand for? And then how do you make sure that when you're on these different platforms and you're having to tailor your content to those demographics, how do you move slightly to the right or the left of that core brand identity, but not in a way where you're completely abandoning it? Because at the end of the day, that 13-year-old is going to eventually grow up to be a 35-year-old, and so you want that person with you for that whole life cycle. You want to make sure you're not creating content that feels alien across those different platforms.
Right on. Okay, thank you. Alyssa. Alyssa is the Director of Development and Programming at Cheddar. It's the #1 business news outlet for 18 to 44-year-olds. She oversees original social content that reaches Cheddar's 5.5 million social followers and hundreds of thousands of live viewers every day on more than 50 platforms. Cheddar recently launched Snapchat Publisher Stories, a second network called Cheddar Big News on YouTube TV, and now has a distribution partnership with Hulu Live. To get a look at what Alyssa's network does,
This is Cheddar.
Live from the New York Stock Exchange.
Coming to you live from the White House.
Here in Los Angeles.
We're live at Apple's iPhone 10 unveil right now.
It broke the internet overnight.
It's all about breaking the rules. Like, you look at Cheddar, it's overturning all of the TV industry.
It's a one-stop shop for the latest in tech, business, and media.
Watch us live.
Watch us live.
Tune in live.
Watch us live.
I wanted to see that twice.
So Alyssa, talk to me a little bit about the mission of Cheddar and then how the work that you do specifically fits into that.
Yeah. So Cheddar obviously started as a live news organization, and I had never worked in live TV before, so a lot of people were like, that's a weird move. But Cheddar as a brand is about what's changing people's lives, the technologies, the people, the brands that are changing it. In order to really solidify our brand voice, we knew that we needed to create content outside of just live, a foundation that people could really buy into and understand, and then opt in to becoming a live viewer as well. So I oversee, I always joke, the non-live, so not dead, but not alive content, and our special projects. So if we're partnering with TV networks or doing a special live, like we did earlier today in Vidcon, if anybody caught it, we did a 45-minute live show from the ballroom. I do that.
And you're on an amazing number of platforms. So can you talk a little bit about how do you take one story and translate that into that sort of platform intentionality across?
Yeah, so we are on 60% of smart TVs in America and on almost every single OTT partner and every single social platform. And so we're every single day kind of thinking about what are those platforms and how do we create one story but then travel it across all of those different places. And that's not that easy because every platform has a unique behavior. So we're kind of first thinking about that content and then thinking about the audience behavior and the different places that it's going, whether that's live, then being clipped down to social, or a piece of long form content then being integrated into live with a guest. It's kind of a puzzle, I would say, every single day of how to piece together the right story to the right audience at the right time.
We actually have a video of what that looks like.
Great.
So one of the things that I think is interesting about Cheddar is that you are targeting a very specific audience, and that is business. But you don't always hit it straight on. Can you talk a little bit about the various ways that you approach what you're doing, the content you're creating?
It's funny because it's food. I'm like, it's not a taste made video, I swear. So we think about business in a broad sense because at the end of the day, whether you're super interested in business or finance, which is what's core to Cheddar, we all buy things, right? And some of us invest in the stock market and some of us in Bitcoin, and that's all business. So it's actually much more universal than I think people originally kind of assumed by looking at what the tagline of Cheddar is. So this is actually a series called The Business of Going Viral. And it's about how a product or a business or a store has a moment of virality that changes their business. And so this was something that we had shot for YouTube, and then we were like, wow, this is a great story, and we actually reformatted it, changed some of the editing, got some additional footage, and then had it kind of go across every single platform. So the story stayed the same, but how it looked in those different places was very different. And we're now kind of making sure that our content strategy is very much linked to that broader mission of Cheddar, but it's also more specific to the platforms. Not everybody wants the same type of business story on the same type of platform.
I think one of the interesting things, we have an example of this, is when you're talking about targeting demographics and building your content around that, understanding that we're also still people. So just because you have a general interest in business, there's a whole life cycle outside of that actually can be targeted as well. And I imagine that helps build the brand out a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So about a year ago, Cheddar didn't really have much other than live, and we started creating social content, text on screen, your traditional using found footage and putting text and telling a story about it. But we really had to think about what was going to be our unique place so that when it showed up in people's social feeds, they were like, oh, Cheddar, that's really cool, it's about this. So we really focused on those products and stories that were changing people's lives, and a lot of times things that people could buy. So every day we're kind of digging around for those businesses and people and stories that are product specific or industry specific, and then building stories around that. So this is an example of one of them. everybody go buy one because we get affiliate revenue. So, I mean, it's just kind of a silly product, but it was wedding season, so we kind of tapped into that, and this is actually our most viewed Instagram video ever. So apparently a lot of people have this problem.
I mean, I don't wear high heels, but that seems like, that just seems genius.
Yeah,
anyway.
I mean, we're genius for making the video, but yeah, they were genius for making the product.
Excellent. So, and what's something that you would share with folks here in terms of, you know, as you look at programming specific to specific demographics? What's a little insider info for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think our insider info or our secret sauce is that our content strategy and our audience development strategy are one and the same. So we're never creating a piece of content without thinking about the audience and the platform that it's going on, and we're really programming to the behavior of those platforms. Our content can't just be a really good video, it also has to really think about how people are gonna find it and how long it's gonna be and when they're gonna find it. And so we work really, really closely with our development team, with our growth team, our social team. So I would say that's super important. Is this where I'm supposed to give my secret?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then my secret is not to do things for bragging rights, to do things for your audience. If you do something just because you want to get press for it or you think it's a really cool idea, that won't always translate into building your brand, into staying true to your story. So I think that's the most important thing. And sometimes it means not doing something you really, really want to do, but it's worth it in the end.
Thank you. Okay, so before we move on to the next set of videos, I have to give a disclaimer, which is that the content you're about to see doesn't look anything like the content that you just saw. And that's for good reason, because the content that we're about to talk about is programmed for a very different demographic than the millennials and the Gen Xers. This is content that is programmed specifically for kids and Gen Z. I think that there's something really interesting happening in this video. After conversations I had with Chase, it's, the Gen Z is the first demographic that has only ever known on-demand content. And they've never lived in a world where YouTube, it didn't exist. So they have the YouTube and the relationship that YouTubers have with their audience. And I think that that's a really important distinction that ultimately for any of us who are creating content, we're gonna have to at least acknowledge that, and I think bring that into the way that we produce. So we're going to hear from Chase Landau, who is the Vice President of Partnership at Pocket Watch. It's a new media brand that focuses on content for kids 3 to 8 years old across multiple franchises and formats. It boasts a growing portfolio of franchises that include some of the largest kids and family YouTube brands in the world, and this is what that looks like.
Hey, what up? It's me, Doc from Pocket Watch. Are you excited? I'm asking myself, and the answer is yes. Reviews,
Gaming,
blogging,
cooking,
cool, awesome stuff. Sports.
Chase, what are the differences towards, in programming to a Gen Z demo versus some of the other demos?
Sure. So kids today have unprecedented access to content, and they're consuming that content across multiple platforms. They have their own devices. In fact, Common Sense Media did a study on kids' media use. In 2011, 3% of kids, 0 to 8, had their own device. By 2017, that number had jumped to 45%, which is a huge gap in a short period of time. To us, that translates directly to kids really being in control of the content. So gone are the days of waiting till next week to tune into the next episode. They can binge watch, they can search for their favorite formats and go down a rabbit hole on YouTube. They can pull up Netflix and watch their favorite movie over and over again. So they're in much more control than previous generations. They're also looking for a much more holistic experience, right? So they watch a video, they want to go sometimes create that video on their own, or they want to go and do exactly what they watched their favorite influencer do in that video. So it's a very, very special kind of connection, and it's really exciting to be a part of it.
I feel like it's like television was the relationship between watching something and doing something with TV is like, say, this distance. Digital has brought it much, much closer. I feel like the kind of content that, at least it appears, is coming around the bend, it's right there. I mean, I know I have a young daughter, 9 years old, and she comes into our kitchen and says, "We're making pizza. Why are we making pizza?" And she says, because she just watched somebody on TV, on YouTube do it, and then she turns around and she's got the recipe, it's all kind of a mess, and like I'm still cleaning flour out of the floorboards, but she watched that and then turned around and did it. I have a son a little bit older who does the same thing with video games. He's watching something, a video game player, he'll put the phone down, pick up the controller, and start playing. So to me, that you hear a lot about how like certain demographics only like this kind of thing, and for the most part, I tend to not agree with that because we all love good storytelling. Nobody ever wants to go watch something boring. Like, it doesn't matter how old you are, right? This actually feels a little bit different to me, and it feels like it's an evolution of the content that we're creating. So is that, and I noticed like most of the clips that you have there, they're all active. Like there's no passivity around sitting back and watching it, but that like everyone's meant to be an active participant in the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it comes down to the control that they have, and they can not only search for something very specific that they're interested in, it's like they don't have to defer to what broadcast is dictating they should be watching. So it's special.
That's great. And so to Jay and Alyssa, when as you target your specific audiences, do you give consideration to those new audiences that are sort of onboarding, and does that, how does what you just heard there sort of impact your thinking around the new programming that you're doing?
Oh, hi. I mean, for us, we just launched on Snapchat, so that was the first time that we kind of had to think, okay, we're definitely going to be talking to a slightly younger demo, because across everything we do, we're very core to 20s and 30s, and we're actually one of the older publishers on Snapchat, so it worked out well, but there was a mindset shift that had to happen. If a 15-year-old watches this, are they going to care? And kind of asking yourself that question, because eventually that person will be 18, then 18 will be 25, so we're always kind of thinking about that future, I would say, and especially because we're focused on business and products, capturing and thinking about them before they start spending their money is important, because we hope to be able to help educate them in those choices when the time comes.
Yeah, for us, I think a lot of it is when you identify those formats, and for us, specific shows that really resonate with that audience, how can you change your programming strategy around those shows to kind of maximize exactly what Chase talked about, which is kids of that age have the ability to kind of go down that rabbit hole and binge watch your thing. We have a show called Tiny Kitchen you saw a little clip of it, but it's people playing with miniature food. And it's massively popular with this demo. We'll have people like come by our office for normal business meetings, and then they'll whisper like, "Hey, can I bring my kids back to like see the Tiny Kitchen?" And so one of the things we did to kind of maximize how this specific audience interacts with that show is we used to run it once a week on our Snapchat, and now we run it literally every single day. It's its own tile when you pop into Snapchat. So we kind of have given people the opportunity to binge watch this show in a way that our kind of traditional programming wouldn't allow. And we've seen that really resonate with that kind of younger audience.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing is that the flexibility and learning in real time from the content that you're putting out there is really key. Can you talk about what that's like? When you launch a show, you've got something in mind, performance metrics, the demo you're trying to hit. Can you talk about what happens after you launch that show and how and what that adjustment is like and how how you manage that?
Yeah, I can jump into that. For us, because it's all food, we have this amazing ability to kind of look at data across. When we used to have a big YouTube network, we would look at the data across all the channels that we were working with, and they're all in the exact same demographics. You can start to draw these conclusions about what works and what doesn't work. I think one of the most interesting things we saw was there was this thing happening at the end of a video, and this was in every show that we launched, where the second the host took the bite of the food, whether there were 30 seconds left or 3 minutes left, everybody was like, all right, bye. That was the end of the video. That bite kind of like signified that the video was over, even if there was still plenty of video left. So we made this like wholesale shift across all of our shows to kind of have that moment be a call to action to allow us to be like, all right, take the bite, now stick around or go watch this thing next. And so I think it's looking at all the data that we get back from all of these amazing platforms that we're all on and thinking about how that data impacts that show, and then how can you change the show to kind of better optimize it for those platforms.
Melissa?
I'm very similar to what Jay said, but also listening to the audience and really thinking about the comments that they're leaving and the way that they're watching it and failing with them. If they don't like something, don't try to force them to like it. Just don't do it again. So that's very important. And then for all of our partners that we're working with, we're always getting data back from them around viewership on OTT and when and time shifting and thinking about what we can uniquely give to those different partners in order to entice people to watch them. So even though we have so many different partners, we have dozens of OTT partners, over 50 partners total. We're now on 600 college campuses. Nobody gets the same content, and that there's a whole team that deals with that, not me. But I get back the data from them so that we can make sure that our content strategy is thinking about how that behavior is happening and how people are watching.
Chase?
Similar to what Jay and Alyssa said, we work with 5 of the biggest content creators and brands on YouTube in the kids space. So we work with Ryan Toys Review, Hobby Kids, EvanTube, JillianTube, and Captain Sparkles. We get a lot of data from watching how their videos perform. And with each of those creators, they've evolved with YouTube, with the platform that they're currently primarily on. So when we look at Ryan Toys Review, he started out unboxing toys and opening surprise eggs. Well, when you look on the channel today, there's multiple formats, including science experiments. And he's teaching kids how tornadoes are made. And so, just seeing the evolution of our creators, learning from what's working for them, and then applying that to our own, premium projects.
So IGTV is a thing this week, just launched. I would love to hear your take on, right now you have access to so many millions of people. You're already on a lot of platforms. You've got finite amount of resources to put them against any particular project. So what do you, that lands, what do you do? Are you like, I'm in, we're going full force into that, or do you wait and see how it performs and what happens next? Jay?
I mean, for us, we're like fully into it. I think it helps for us because we've been on Snapchat, and I think other people on this panel, like when you already have stuff in vertical video, it's easy to kind of make that leap. But anytime there's a new platform launch like that, nobody really knows how it's going to go. It doesn't cost you anything to upload your video to that platform. Like, you should totally take advantage of it. For us, even though the product's been live for like maybe 36 hours, like we're already seeing like really interesting traction that's totally different from how people engage with our Instagram feed and even our Instagram stories. So for us, IGTV could be really interesting and really big.
How long do you give before you commit to that as like, all right, this is a thing, we're gonna put some resources against that?
I mean, for something like this, I think we're pretty bullish on Instagram as a platform in general, so we feel like it will be successful. New platforms, like we did some stuff with like Musical.ly and places like that, like where we'll give it 3 or 4 months and kind of see if it works, and then maybe deploy resources elsewhere if it doesn't. But for us, we want to hit consumers everywhere that they are. So getting on those new platforms is kind of a no-brainer.
Alyssa?
Exactly the same. I mean, when we heard the press announcement that IGTV was coming, I was like, bring the alarm. What are we gonna do? And because we had just launched on Snapchat, we had already started converting a lot of content to vertical and thinking about original vertical videos. So IGTV launched, and 3 minutes after it launched, we were on it. Much to the chagrin of my post-production team, who really doesn't love vertical video, we are dedicating more and more resources to it and to really thinking about vertical first. We tend to think about one piece of content and how it can be 69 and then 9 by 16, but I think IGTV and Snapchat really force you to think differently. So, you know, we're very bullish about it and kind of bullish about every new platform because, again, do it. If it doesn't work, just don't do it anymore.
Good plan. Chase, for the Gen Z demo, I mean, right now they're pretty entrenched in YouTube. When Instagram comes up with something, is that something that you all get interested in?
I think we're interested. I think we're a little bit more cautious because we want to be everywhere that kids are. And when I think about Instagram, that platform does skew a little bit older. We're really honed in on the 2 to 12 space, and certainly at the upper end of that demographic. Those Gen Zers will be on Instagram, but they're primarily on YouTube. The numbers don't lie, right? We value Instagram, and certainly we'll value IGTV because I think that's where there are more parents, and certainly for our business, we need to have access to parents, and because they're the ones who buy the stuff for the kids. So, I think we're a little bit more cautious than those guys, but important nonetheless.
Right. One more question, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. How do you? What is the success metric that you use to define, the products that you're putting out there on these various platforms?
It's a good question. I mean, I think, look, all of our businesses are defined by revenue, so I won't say monetization because that's a given for anybody who's in this space, right? You eventually have to figure out how you make money. For us, though, I think watch time and time spent is actually more important than the sheer number of views you get on something. If we can get 1 million people to watch it, but they all only watch for 1 second, that's not that interesting. That's not that good for our brand. What's great for our brand is if we can get 10,000 people to watch it, but they all watched 5 or 6 minutes of it. That's how you build a real connection with the audience. So for us, it's time spent and watch time.
What was it?
Yeah, similar, but general audience growth is really important, and audience growth platform specific, so not just seeing a total number go up, but making sure that each of the different key platforms is growing and growing in the right way, that we're making better content, which hopefully then relates to better engagement and more time spent. And then I always think if there's a lot of people asking me for jobs on LinkedIn, then we're doing something right. So I think that's a personal success metric, but I feel like an important one out in the world.
Chase?
Similar to Elisa, audience growth is an important metric. I think in addition to that, Pocket Watch is a newer company. We've been around a year, but our goal is to be everywhere, right? So we want to be on YouTube, short form, premium, on Netflix, but we also want to be in store in major retailers, in the checkout line, whether that's merchandise, apparel, toys, you name it. So I think, bird's eye view, being everywhere is probably the most important success metric. And, we're making progress steadily.
Right on. Do we have any questions?